The stars had never looked so cold. Fleet Admiral Kethoran stood at the observation window of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched as ship after ship dropped out of hyperspace. Each arrival sent ripples of light across the darkness. Each ship represented centuries of Volanthi engineering, the pride of an empire that had ruled this sector of space for 12,000 years. 127 warships, the full strength of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. Kethoran allowed himself a rare smile. His scales, deep green with age and marked by the scars of a dozen campaigns, shifted as his facial muscles moved. He was old by Volanthi standards, nearly 400 years, but his mind remained sharp and his ambition sharper still. Today would be the day that humanity learned its place in the galaxy. "Admiral," a voice called from behind him. "All ships have reported in. The fleet is assembled and awaiting your orders." Kethoran turned to face his second-in-command, Commander Vethal. The younger officer stood rigid, his yellow eyes bright with anticipation. Like most of the crew, Vethal had never fought humans before. He had only heard the tales of a small, soft species that had somehow clawed its way into space barely 300 years ago. 300 years. The thought made Kethoran want to laugh. His own species had been building warships when humans were still living in caves, hitting each other with rocks. The idea that such primitives could pose any threat to the hegemony was absurd. And yet, here they were. "Excellent," Kethoran said. "Signal all captains. I want a fleet-wide address in 1 hour. We have much to discuss before we begin our mission." "Yes, Admiral." As Vethal hurried away to carry out the order, Kethoran returned his gaze to the stars. Somewhere out there, past the swirling nebula known as the Cygnus Reach, lay human space, dozens of colony worlds, each one filled with millions of those strange, hairless creatures. They had spread quickly, these humans, too quickly for the hegemony's comfort. The High Council had tolerated their expansion at first. After all, space was vast, and the humans seemed content to keep to themselves. They traded peacefully with their neighbors. They signed treaties and honored them. They built colonies on worlds that no one else wanted. But then they had crossed the line. The Cygnus Reach had been Volanthi territory for 8,000 years. It did not matter that the hegemony had never bothered to colonize it. It did not matter that the worlds there were harsh and unwelcoming. The principle was what mattered. The Reach belonged to the Volanthi, and the humans had dared to plant their flags on Volanthi soil. 3 colonies now sat within the Reach. 3 insults to hegemony pride. The High Council had sent diplomatic protests, then warnings, then threats. The humans had ignored them all, claiming that uninhabited space belonged to whoever settled it first. Suk arrogance. Suk foolishness. Now, the time for diplomacy was over. The High Council had given Kethoran a simple order: make an example of the humans. Burn their colonies. Kill their people. Send a message that the galaxy would not soon forget. Kethoran intended to carry out that order with pleasure. 1 hour later, he stood on the command platform of the Eternal Dominion's bridge, his image being broadcast to every ship in the fleet. Around him, the bridge crew worked at their stations, monitoring sensors and communications while trying not to stare at their admiral. "Warriors of the hegemony," Kethoran began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Today we embark on a sacred mission. Today, we remind the galaxy why the Volanthi have ruled these stars for 12,000 years. He paused, letting the words sink in. "The humans believe themselves our equals. They look upon our empire and see not the glory of ages, but an obstacle to their expansion. They have taken what is ours. They have ignored our warnings. They have spat upon our honor." His clawed hands tightened on the railing before him. "No more. Today, we teach them the price of such arrogance. Our target is the human colony world of Arcadia Prime, their largest settlement in the Cygnus Reach. When we are finished, there will be nothing left. No buildings, no infrastructure, no survivors. Let the humans look upon the ashes of Arcadia Prime and understand what it means to challenge the Volanthi hegemony." Across the fleet, crews cheered. Kethoran could imagine them, thousands of warriors eager for battle, hungry for glory. It had been too long since the hegemony had fought a real war, too long since they had reminded the younger species of their place. "We jump in 6 hours, Kethoran continued. "Rest well, my warriors. Tomorrow, we make history." He cut the transmission and stepped down from the platform. Around him, the bridge erupted in activity as officers began preparing for the jump. Ketheron paid them little attention. His mind was already on Arcadia Prime, imagining the fires that would soon consume it. "Admiral?" The voice was quiet, hesitant. Ketheran turned to find a young officer standing behind him, a female with pale blue scales and nervous eyes. Her rank insignia marked her as a sub-commander, barely more than a junior officer. "What is it?" Ketheran demanded. He did not like being interrupted. "Forgive me, Admiral. I am Sub-Commander Wyrus, Tactical Analysis Division. I have concerns about the mission that I feel compelled to share." Ketheran studied her for a moment. She was young, probably not even 50 years old. Too young to remember the last time the hegemony had fought a serious war. Too young to understand how these things worked. "Speak," he said, more out of curiosity than any real interest in her opinion. Eurus swallowed hard. "Sir, I have been reviewing our intelligence on human military capabilities. Or rather, the lack of it. We have almost no reliable data on their warships. No confirmed specifications. No battle records. Nothing. Because there is nothing to know," Ketheran replied dismissively. "The humans have never fought a real war. They have a handful of patrol ships and some outdated defense platforms. They are prey, not predators." "But sir, that is precisely my concern." Eurus pressed on despite the warning look in the Admiral's eyes. "We have sent 17 reconnaissance ships into human space over the past 2 years. Only 3 returned. The others simply vanished. Equipment failures, navigation errors. Space is dangerous, Sub-Commander. And the frontier colonies? The ones we have been raiding?" Eurus pulled out a data pad and offered it to the Admiral. "I have analyzed the reports. Something strange is happening. Our raiders attack human settlements, and the humans do not fight back. They do not flee. They do not send distress calls. They simply disappear." Ketheran glanced at the datapad but did not take it. "Your point?" "Sir, I believe the humans are hiding something. Some military capability that we do not understand. I recommend we proceed with caution. Perhaps send a smaller force first to test their defenses before committing the entire fleet." For a long moment, Ketheran said nothing. Then he laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that echoed across the bridge. "Sub-Commander Wyrus, I admire your dedication to your duties. But you are young, and you do not yet understand the nature of power." He gestured toward the observation window, where dozens of warships hung against the stars. "This fleet represents more firepower than the humans could accumulate in 1,000 years. We have weapons that can crack planets, shields that can withstand the heart of a star. We are the Valanthi hegemony, and we have ruled these stars since before humanity's ancestors crawled out of the ocean." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more weight than his earlier speech. "There is nothing the humans have that can threaten us. Nothing. Do you understand?" Eurus hesitated, then lowered her eyes. "Yes, Admiral. I understand." "Good. Return to your duties. And Sub-Commander?" He waited until she looked up again. "Keep your concerns to yourself. I will not have you spreading fear through my fleet." "Yes, Admiral." Eurus turned and walked away, her steps quick and her head down. Ketheran watched her go, then dismissed her from his thoughts entirely. Young officers were always nervous before their first battle. She would learn. The next 6 hours passed quickly. Crews ran final checks on weapons and shields. Engineers verified jump coordinates. Medical teams prepared for casualties that everyone expected would be minimal. Throughout the fleet, warriors sharpened their claws and recited ancient prayers to the gods of war. Ketheran spent the time in his quarters, reviewing the tactical plans for the 100th time. The attack would be simple and overwhelming. The fleet would drop out of hyperspace in a standard combat formation, surrounding Arcadia Prime on all sides. They would give the humans one chance to surrender, a formality, nothing more, and then begin the bombardment. Within hours, the colony would be nothing but smoking ruins. Simple, clean, efficient. When the time came, Ketheran returned to the bridge. He took his place on the command platform and surveyed his crew. Every face showed determination. Every eye burned with purpose. These were the finest warriors the hegemony had to offer, and they were ready. "All ships report ready for jump," Commander Vethal announced. "Then let us begin." Ketheran raised one clawed hand. All ships, engage hyperspace drives. For the glory of the hegemony. The stars stretched into lines of light as the eternal dominion leaped into hyperspace. Around it, 126 other ships did the same, the entire fleet vanishing from normal space in a matter of seconds. The journey took less than an hour. Hyperspace travel was one of the hegemony's oldest technologies, refined over millennia, until it was as reliable as breathing. Kethoran spent the time standing at the observation window, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace and imagining the destruction to come. Approaching target system, the navigation officer announced. Exiting hyperspace in 30 seconds. Kethoran straightened. All hands to battle stations, weapons ready, shields at full power. The bridge exploded into controlled chaos as officers carried out his orders. Warning lights flashed. Klaxons sounded. Throughout the ship, warriors rushed to their positions, eager for the fight to begin. 10 seconds. Kethoran gripped the railing before him. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Exiting hyperspace now. The swirling colors vanished, replaced by the familiar black of normal space. Stars appeared, sharp and bright. And there, hanging like a jewel against the darkness, was Arcadia Prime, a blue-green world that looked almost peaceful from this distance. All ships have exited hyperspace, Vethal reported. Fleet formation is intact. No enemy contacts on sensors. As expected, Kethoran said. The humans probably do not even know we are here. Begin approach to Arcadia Prime. Standard attack formation. Yes, Admiral. The fleet began to move. 127 ships advancing toward the helpless colony world. Kethoran allowed himself another smile. This would be easier than he had thought. The humans truly had no defenses worth mentioning. By this time tomorrow, Arcadia Prime would be. Admiral, the shout came from the sensor station, where a young officer was staring at his display with wide eyes. What is it? Kethoran demanded. Contact, sir. Hyperspace signature detected at the edge of the system. Something just arrived. Human reinforcements? How many ships? The sensor officer checked his readings twice before answering. When he spoke, his voice was strange, confused, uncertain. One ship, Admiral. Just one. Kethoran frowned. One ship? Against our entire fleet? He laughed, and several officers around the bridge laughed with him. The humans are either very brave or very stupid. Put it on the main display. The forward screen flickered, then showed a magnified image of the new arrival. Kethoran's laughter died in his throat. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was roughly the size of a cruiser, perhaps 300 meters long. But its shape was wrong, all smooth curves and impossible angles that seemed to shift and change even as he watched. Its hull was black, but not the black of painted metal. It was the black of empty space, of absolute darkness, of something that absorbed light rather than reflected it, and it was moving toward them. Get me readings on that ship, Kethoran ordered, his voice carefully controlled. Mass, energy signatures, weapons systems, everything. Trying, Admiral. The sensor officer's claws danced over his console. Mass readings are inconsistent. The ship appears to weigh approximately 50,000 tons, but the readings keep fluctuating. Energy signatures are off the charts, but I cannot determine their source. And weapons systems, he trailed off. Weapons, systems what? I cannot detect any, sir, but that does not mean they are not there. I am not sure our sensors can even properly scan this vessel. Kethoran stared at the screen. The strange ship continued to approach, moving with a grace that seemed almost organic. It made no attempt to evade or hide. It simply came, steady and inexorable. For the first time in centuries, Fleet Admiral Kethoran felt something he barely recognized. Fear. He crushed it immediately. He was a Valanthi warrior, commander of the mightiest fleet in the sector. He would not be intimidated by a single ship, no matter how strange it appeared. Signal the destroyer squadron, he ordered. 12 ships should be more than enough to handle whatever this is. Tell them to intercept and capture the vessel if possible. I want to know what we are dealing with. Yes, Admiral. As the orders went out, Kethoran continued to watch the mysterious ship. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Sub-Commander Eurus's words echoed. I believe the humans are hiding something. He pushed the thought away. Whatever this ship was, it was still just one ship. One ship against the might of the Valanthi hegemony. What could it possibly do? The 12 destroyers of the Volanthe 7th Squadron moved through space like predators closing in on wounded prey. Each ship was 200 meters of killing power, sleek, fast, and armed with enough weaponry to reduce a small moon to rubble. Together, they represented more firepower than most species could field in their entire military. Captain Morith commanded the lead destroyer, the Swift Vengeance. He was a veteran of 30 years, a warrior who had fought in border skirmishes and suppressed rebellions across a dozen worlds. He had never lost a battle, and he did not intend to start today. "Distance to target?" he asked, keeping his voice calm despite the tension he felt. 40,000 kilometers in closing, Captain. We will be in weapons range in approximately 3 minutes. Moreth nodded and studied the image on his tactical display. The human ship, if that was what it was, continued to drift toward them at a leisurely pace. It had not changed course since being detected. It had not raised shields or powered weapons. It simply hung there in the darkness, that impossible black hull seeming to drink in the light of distant stars. "Any response to our hails?" "None, Captain. The vessel is not acknowledging our communications." Strange. Even the most primitive species usually responded when a fleet of warships approached them. Either the humans aboard that ship were very confident, or they were very foolish. Moreth suspected the latter. This was probably some kind of reconnaissance vessel, sent to observe the Volanthe fleet before scurrying back to report. The crew had likely panicked when they realized how badly outmatched they were. They were probably sitting in the dark, hoping that if they stayed quiet, the predators would pass them by. It would not work. "All ships," Moreth announced over the squadron channel. "Weapons free. Disable that vessel and prepare boarding parties. The Admiral wants prisoners." 11 acknowledgements came back, each captain confirming their readiness. The squadron spread into a standard envelopment pattern, surrounding the human ship on all sides. There would be no escape. "Weapons range in 30 seconds, the tactical officer reported. Moreth allowed himself a small smile. This would be over quickly. 20 seconds. 10. "We are in range, Captain." "Fire." 12 destroyers opened fire simultaneously. Plasma beams lanced across the void, each one carrying enough energy to melt through starship armor, like a hot knife through soft flesh. Missiles followed 36 of them, streaking toward the target with deadly precision. Kinetic rounds, fired from electromagnetic cannons at a fraction of the speed of light, completed the barrage. The human ship disappeared behind a wall of fire and light. For 5 seconds, Moreth's crew could see nothing through the chaos of their own weapons. Then the sensors recalibrated, cutting through the interference to show them the result of their attack. Moreth's smile vanished. The human ship sat exactly where it had been before, untouched, unmarked, as pristine as the moment it had arrived. The plasma beams had not even scorched its hull. The missiles had detonated against some invisible barrier and accomplished nothing. The kinetic rounds. Moreth stared at his display in disbelief. The kinetic rounds were still there, frozen in space just meters from the human ship's hull. They hung motionless, suspended by some force that his sensors could not explain. Thousands of projectiles, each one moving at incredible speed just moments ago, now held perfectly still like insects trapped in amber. "What?" one of his officers whispered. "What is that?" Before anyone could answer, the human ship began to glow. It started as a faint shimmer along the vessel's edges, a ripple in space that made Moreth's eyes water to look at. Then the glow intensified, spreading across the hull until the entire ship blazed with cold blue light. The frozen kinetic rounds began to disintegrate, breaking apart into atoms that were absorbed into the light, and then reality itself seemed to fold. Moreth had no other way to describe it. Space twisted around his squadron, bending in ways that violated everything he knew about physics. He saw the Crimson Fury to his left stretch like taffy, its hull elongating impossibly before snapping back. He saw the Warrior's Pride to his right simply cease to exist for a fraction of a second before reappearing in a different position. Then he saw nothing at all. The fold closed around the 12 destroyers like a fist. For one eternal moment, Moreth experienced something that no Volanthe had ever experienced before: the sensation of being compressed, of being squeezed down into a space far too small to contain him. He tried to scream, but his lungs had already collapsed. 3 seconds. That was all it took. When the fold released, when space returned to its normal shape, there were no destroyers left. There was only debris, twisted metal, and shattered hulls, and the frozen bodies of warriors who had never even had time to understand what killed them. 12 ships, carrying over 3,000 crew members, reduced to scattered wreckage in the time it took to draw a breath. The human ship drifted serenely through the destruction, its hull still glowing faintly, completely unharmed. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, silence reigned. Fleet Admiral Kethoran stood motionless, his claws still gripping the railing, his eyes fixed on the main display. Around him, his officers stared at their screens with expressions of shock and disbelief. No one spoke. No one moved. For a long moment, the only sound was the gentle hum of the ship's systems. Then someone dropped a data pad. The clatter seemed impossibly loud in the stillness. "Admiral?" Commander Vethal's voice was barely a whisper. "Admiral, the destroyer squadron. They are gone. All of them. In 3 seconds." Kethoran did not respond. He could not respond. His mind was struggling to process what he had just witnessed. 12 warships, crewed by some of the finest warriors in the hegemony, destroyed in 3 seconds by a single vessel. Not damaged, not disabled, destroyed utterly, completely, in ways that defied explanation. This was impossible. This could not be happening. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the human ship." The sensor officer's words snapped Kethoran back to reality. He straightened, forcing his expression into something that resembled calm authority. "Put it through." The main display flickered. The image of the human ship was replaced by something even more disturbing. Text, written in perfect Valanthi script. The characters glowed white against a black background, each one formed with absolute precision. The message was simple. 7 words that changed everything. "You have been judged. Withdraw or face extinction." No one on the bridge moved. No one breathed. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "Arrogance," Kethoran growled, finding his voice at last. "Human arrogance. They destroy 12 ships and believe they can threaten the entire hegemony." "Sir, with respect," Vethal began carefully. "What we just witnessed, I have never seen anything like it. Our weapons had no effect. There, whatever that was, it tore through our destroyers like they were not even there. One ship." Kethoran whirled on his second-in-command, scales bristling with anger. "It is one ship, Vethal. One. We have 115 warships remaining. Whatever trick they used against the destroyers, they cannot use it against our entire fleet. Admiral, perhaps we should contact High Command, report what we have seen, request instructions, and tell them what?" Kethoran's voice dripped with contempt. "That we ran from a single human vessel? That the mightiest fleet in the sector was frightened away by some parlor trick?" He shook his head violently. "No, we will not be remembered as cowards. We will destroy this ship, complete our mission, and return home as heroes." He turned to face the main display again. The message still glowed there, mocking him. Withdraw or face extinction. Who did these humans think they were? They had existed for less than an eye blink compared to the Valanthi. They knew nothing of war, nothing of conquest, nothing of the true nature of power, and they would learn their lesson today. "All ships," Kethoran announced, his voice carrying across every channel in the fleet. "This is the Admiral. What you have witnessed is a demonstration, nothing more. The humans have some new weapon, some trick designed to frighten us, but we are Valanthi. We do not frighten easily." He paused, letting his words sink in. "That ship destroyed 12 of our vessels. For that, there must be payment. I am ordering the full fleet to engage. All 115 ships. We will surround that vessel, overwhelm its defenses with sheer firepower, and reduce it to atoms. Let no warrior hesitate. Let no captain show weakness. For the glory of the hegemony, attack." Across the fleet, crews that had been frozen in shock sprang into action. Officers shouted orders. Weapons powered up. Shields strengthened. The Valanthi were a proud people, and Kethoran's words had stirred that pride. Whatever this human ship was, it was still just one ship. It could not possibly stand against the combined might of an entire fleet. Could it? Sub-Commander Eurus watched from her station as the fleet began to move. Her scales had turned pale, a sign of extreme stress in her species, and her claws trembled slightly as they rested on her console. Unlike the Admiral, unlike most of the crew, She felt no surge of pride or determination. She felt only fear. What she had just witnessed was not a parlor trick. It was not some clever weapon system that could be overwhelmed with numbers. It was something else entirely, something that her scientific mind could barely comprehend. The way space had folded around those destroyers. The way the kinetic rounds had simply stopped in mid-flight. The way the entire attack had been absorbed without leaving a single mark on the enemy hull. This was technology beyond anything the Volanthi possessed. Beyond anything anyone possessed, as far as she knew. This was the kind of power that existed only in ancient legends, in stories of gods and demons that her ancestors had told around campfires millennia ago. And the Admiral wanted to attack it. Sub-Commander Eurus. She looked up to find Commander Vethal standing beside her station. His expression was carefully neutral, but she could see the fear in his eyes, the same fear she felt. "Commander," she acknowledged, "the Admiral has ordered all tactical officers to coordinate the attack. You are to analyze the enemy vessel's defenses and identify weaknesses." Eurus almost laughed. Weaknesses? That ship had just shrugged off enough firepower to crack a planet. What weakness could she possibly find? But she kept her thoughts to herself and nodded. "Yes, Commander. I will do what I can." Vethal hesitated, then leaned closer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Eurus, what you said earlier, about the humans hiding something. You were right. I should have listened. It does not matter now, Commander." "No, I suppose it does not." He straightened and walked away, leaving Eurus alone with her screens and her fear. The fleet moved into position, spreading out to surround the human ship from every direction. 115 warships, each one bristling with weapons, formed a sphere of death with the enemy vessel at its center. From any other perspective, it would have looked overwhelming, an impossible display of military might that no single ship could hope to survive. From Eurus's perspective, it looked like a funeral procession. She pulled up every sensor reading she could find, every scan of the enemy ship, every piece of data from the destroyer squadron's brief engagement. She analyzed power signatures and hull composition and energy patterns. She ran simulations and calculations and probability matrices, and she found nothing. Nothing that could explain what she had witnessed. Nothing that could help her people survive what was coming. The human ship sat motionless at the center of the Volanthi formation, that black hull absorbing light, those impossible angles shifting subtly whenever she looked directly at them. It had not moved since the destroyer's destruction. It had not raised shields or powered weapons, or made any attempt to escape. It was waiting. "All ships in position," the fleet coordinator announced. "Ready to fire on your command, Admiral." Kethoran stood tall on the command platform, his fear buried deep beneath layers of pride and determination. He would not show weakness. He would not falter. He was a Volanthi warrior, and he would die before he ran from a single enemy ship. "All ships," he said. "Open fire." 115 warships fired simultaneously. The space around the human vessel became a solid wall of destruction. Plasma beams converged from every direction, their combined energy output exceeding that of a small star. Missiles by the thousands streaked through the void, their warheads carrying enough explosive power to devastate continents. Kinetic rounds beyond counting filled the gaps, a storm of metal traveling at relativistic speeds. For 10 seconds, the human ship disappeared behind the onslaught. Sensors overloaded. Screens went white with interference. The sheer amount of energy being released created a miniature sun at the heart of the Volanthi formation. Then the sensors cleared, and the human ship was still there. Not damaged, not scratched, not even slightly disturbed. Every beam, every missile, every round had been stopped, frozen in place just like before, held by that invisible force that defied all understanding. The ship floated serenely at the center of a sphere of suspended destruction. Untouchable, invincible, Kethoran stared at the display. His claws had dug furrows into the railing. His scales had lost all color. "That is impossible," he whispered. "That is impossible." The human ship began to glow again. This time, Eurus was watching closely. She saw the moment when the glow became something else, when it expanded outward, pushing against the wall of frozen weapons that surrounded the vessel. She saw the missiles and beams and projectiles begin to vibrate, to shift, to turn. She understood what was about to happen a fraction of a second before it did. "All ships," she screamed into her communicator. "Evasive action. Evasive action now, but it was too late. The sphere of destruction reversed. Every weapon that the Volanthe had fired came screaming back at them, moving 10 times faster than before, carrying energies that had been amplified by whatever force had captured them. Plasma beams that had been meant to destroy now destroyed their makers. Missiles that had been meant to kill now killed their launchers. Kinetic rounds that had been fired in anger now returned that anger tenfold. 43 ships died in the first second. The Crimson Dawn took a direct hit from its own plasma cannons and simply ceased to exist. The Wrath of Keth was torn apart by missiles it had launched just moments before. The Victory Eternal was shredded by kinetic rounds that punched through its hull like needles through cloth. Ship after ship exploded, filling space with fire and debris and the frozen bodies of the dead. And then the human ship moved. It did not fly. It did not accelerate. It simply appeared in a new location, as if it had always been there and everywhere else was just a mistake. One moment it was at the center of the formation. The next moment it was beside the heavy cruiser Dominion's Pride, close enough to touch. A pulse of energy, invisible and silent, rippled out from the human ship. The Dominion's Pride folded in on itself like paper being crumpled by a giant hand. Its reactor detonated, sending a shockwave through nearby vessels. The human ship moved again, and again, and again. It was everywhere at once, appearing beside one ship after another, each appearance accompanied by death. Some vessels were crushed, some were torn apart, some simply vanished, as if they had never existed at all. The Volanthe fleet, so proud and mighty just minutes before, scattered in panic. Eurus watched her tactical display as ship after ship winked out of existence. Red icons representing Volanthe vessels disappeared faster than she could count. The fleet formation had completely collapsed. Captains were fleeing in all directions, trying desperately to escape the nightmare that had descended upon them. None of them succeeded. The human ship was everywhere. No matter how fast they ran, no matter which direction they fled, it was always there, waiting, hunting, killing. Escape was impossible. Survival was impossible. The most powerful fleet in the sector was being slaughtered like animals. How many? Admiral Kethoran's voice was barely recognizable. How many have we lost? Eurus checked her display, though she already knew the answer. 89 ships destroyed, Admiral. 16 disabled or crippled. We have 11 vessels still operational. 11. Out of 127. In less than 2 minutes, Kethoran stood frozen on the command platform, his eyes wide and empty. The warrior who had laughed at human primitives, who had dismissed warnings of hidden capabilities, who had ordered his fleet to attack a single ship, that warrior was gone. In his place stood a broken old man who had just watched his life's work destroyed in the time it took to eat a meal. Admiral. Commander Vethal's voice was urgent. Admiral, we must retreat. We must warn the hegemony. If we stay here, we all die. Kethoran did not respond. He simply stared at the main display, where the human ship had paused its slaughter and now floated motionless among the wreckage. It was waiting again, watching, judging. Admiral. Vethal grabbed Kethoran's shoulder and shook him. Give the order. Something broke behind the Admiral's eyes. His jaw tightened. His scales rippled with something that might have been shame or rage or despair. All ships, he said, his voice hollow and dead. Retreat. Maximum speed. Get us out of here. The 11 surviving vessels turned and ran. Behind them, the human ship did not follow. It simply hung there among the debris of the fleet it had destroyed, that impossible black hull absorbing light, those strange angles shifting in the darkness. And on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Sub-Commander Weirus realized that she was shaking. Not with fear, though the fear was still there. A cold weight in her chest that would never fully leave. She was shaking with something else. Something she had never expected to feel. Oh, she had just witnessed the death of Volanthe supremacy. She had just watched 12,000 years of military dominance end in less than 2 minutes. And despite the horror of it, despite the thousands of lives lost and the destruction wrought, she could not help but feel a strange sense of wonder. Humanity had been spacefaring for 300 years. 300 years compared to 12,000. And yet they had built that. Whatever that ship was, whatever power it possessed, it represented something far beyond anything the Volanthe had ever imagined. The message came again. transmitted to all surviving ships. The same 7 words, glowing white against black. You have been judged. Withdraw, or face extinction. This time, Eurus thought, we might actually listen. The 11 surviving ships fled through the void like wounded animals, running from a predator. Their engines burned at maximum power, pushing the vessels faster than their designers had ever intended. Behind them, the wreckage of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet drifted silently among the stars. 116 ships, reduced to twisted metal and frozen corpses. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, chaos reigned. Officers shouted over each other, trying to coordinate the retreat. Damage control teams raced through the corridors, fighting fires and sealing breaches. Medical staff struggled to treat the wounded, many of whom screamed in pain or lay silent in shock. The flagship had not taken a direct hit, but nearby explosions had battered its hull and sent shrapnel tearing through compartments. Admiral Kethoran sat in his command chair, motionless. His eyes stared at nothing. His claws hung limp at his sides. The warrior who had commanded the mightiest fleet in the sector was gone, replaced by a shell that breathed and blinked but no longer truly lived. Commander Vethal had taken command by necessity. He stood at the tactical station, coordinating the retreat, but his hands trembled as he worked. The fear he had suppressed during the battle now threatened to overwhelm him. Distance from the enemy vessel? He demanded. 50,000 kilometers and increasing. The sensor officer reported. His voice cracked. The human ship is not pursuing. It has remained stationary at the battle site. Maintain current course and speed. Do not slow down until we reach the jump point. Yes, Commander. Vethal allowed himself a small breath of relief. They were escaping. Somehow, impossibly, they were escaping. The human ship had chosen not to chase them down. Perhaps it could not. Perhaps its terrible weapons only worked at close range. Perhaps, Commander, Sub-Commander. Wyrus's voice cut through his thoughts. We need to talk. Vethal turned to face her. Eurus looked pale, her scales almost gray with stress, but her eyes were clear and focused. Unlike most of the crew, she seemed to have moved past the initial shock and was already thinking about what came next. Not now, Sub-Commander. We are in the middle of a retreat. That is precisely why we need to talk now. Eurus stepped closer, lowering her voice so that only Vethal could hear. I have been analyzing the sensor data from the battle. What I found. The Admiral needs to hear this. The High Council needs to hear this. Vethal glanced at Kethoran, who remained frozen in his chair. The Admiral is indisposed. Then you need to hear it. Eurus pulled out her datapad and brought up a series of readings. Look at these energy signatures. Look at the way space distorted around the human ship. Look at the speed of its movements between attack positions. Vethal studied the data, though he understood only a fraction of what he was seeing. What am I looking at? Impossible things. Things that violate the fundamental laws of physics as we understand them. Eurus's voice dropped even lower. Commander, that ship was not using any technology we know. It was not using any technology anyone knows. What we witnessed out there, it was like watching a god fight with ants. The humans are not gods. No, but they have built something that might as well be. Eurus scrolled through more data. I tracked its movements during the battle. It appeared in 47 different positions over 90 seconds. That is not possible with any known propulsion system. It was not moving through space, it was folding space around itself, appearing wherever it wanted to be instantaneously. You are saying it can teleport? I am saying it does not experience space the same way we do, and that is just one of its capabilities. She brought up another screen. Look at this, the energy readings from when it reversed our weapons fire. That should have required more power than a star produces. The ship generated that energy from nowhere. It did not have reactors large enough. It did not have fuel reserves. The energy simply appeared. Vethal felt cold. What are you telling me, Sub-Commander? Eurus met his eyes. I am telling you that we did not lose because we were outgunned. We lost because we were fighting something that exists beyond our understanding. That ship is not a weapon, Commander. It is a force of nature. And we flew 127 warships directly into it. For a long moment, Vethal said nothing. He looked at the main display, where the distance counter continued to climb. 70,000 kilometers, 80,000. The human ship remained a tiny dot at the center of the debris field, motionless and silent. Why did it stop? he asked finally. If it could have destroyed us all, why did it let us escape? I do not know. Perhaps it wanted witnesses. Perhaps it wanted us to carry a message back to the hegemony. Eurus paused. Or perhaps it simply does not consider us a threat worth chasing. That thought was somehow worse than all the others. The idea that a single human ship could slaughter most of their fleet, and then simply let the survivors go. The way a predator might release a mouse it had grown bored of playing with it made Vethal feel small in a way he had never felt before. We need to warn the hegemony, he said. They need to know what they are dealing with. Agreed. But Commander, Eurus hesitated. I do not think warning them will be enough. If the humans have one ship like this, they might have more. And if they have more, then nothing we do will matter. No fleet we could build, no weapon we could develop, no strategy we could devise would make a difference. We would be fighting the tide. Then what do you suggest? Before Eurus could answer, the sensor officer shouted a warning. Commander, the human ship, it is moving. Vethal spun toward the main display. The dot that represented the human vessel had begun to glow, just as it had before each attack. His heart seized in his chest. How fast? Which direction? I cannot tell. The readings are confused. It is like the ship is everywhere and nowhere at once. Evasive maneuvers. All ships, scatter formation. But even as he gave the order, Vethal knew it was useless. They had seen how fast the human ship could move. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run that it could not reach in an instant. If it wanted to destroy them, they were already dead. The glow intensified. Space around the human ship began to ripple and fold. Vethal braced himself for death, and then the ship vanished. Not slowly, not with any fanfare. It simply ceased to be there. One moment it was at the center of the debris field, glowing with impossible energy. The next moment there was nothing but empty space where it had been. The bridge fell silent. Officers stared at their screens, waiting for the ship to reappear, waiting for the death blow that they knew must be coming. Seconds passed, then minutes. Nothing happened. Where did it go? Vethal demanded. Unknown, Commander. I cannot detect it anywhere in the system. It is just gone. Gone. The human ship had annihilated most of their fleet, delivered its message, and then simply left, as if the entire battle had been nothing more than a demonstration, a lesson taught to misbehaving children. Vethal sank into a nearby chair, his legs suddenly too weak to hold him. Around him, the crew began to relax slightly, though the tension never fully left their faces. They were alive, against all odds, against all logic. They were alive. But for how long? Continue to the jump point, Vethal ordered, his voice hollow. Best speed. We need to reach Keth Prime and report to the High Council. Yes, Commander. As the surviving ships limped toward salvation, Sub-Commander Eurus returned to her station and began compiling her report. She documented everything, every sensor reading, every analysis, every conclusion she had drawn. It would not be a pleasant report to deliver. It would not be a report that the High Council wanted to hear, but it was the truth. And the truth, no matter how terrible, was better than the comfortable lies that had led them here. She worked for hours, organizing data and writing summaries, pausing only to check on the Admiral's condition, unchanged, and to grab a quick meal from the ship's emergency rations. By the time the fleet reached the jump point, her report was complete, a comprehensive document that detailed the complete and utter failure of Volanthi military might against a single human vessel. The jump to Keth Prime took 3 days. 3 days of silence, of fear, of whispered conversations in darkened corridors. 3 days of warriors who had expected glory instead processing trauma. 3 days of officers who had believed themselves invincible coming to terms with their own mortality. Admiral Kethoran did not leave his quarters during the journey. Medical officers reported that he was physically unharmed but unresponsive, awake but not present, breathing but not truly alive. The warrior who had laughed at human primitives had been broken by what he had witnessed. His pride, which had been the core of his identity for 4 centuries, had been shattered beyond repair. Vethal assumed full command without ceremony or argument. No one questioned his authority. No one had the energy to question anything anymore. When the Eternal Dominion and its 10 companion vessels finally emerged from hyperspace above Keth Prime, they were met by a patrol squadron that had been scrambled to investigate. The patrol commander's voice came through the communication system. confused and concerned. "This is Commander Reth of the Keth Prime Defense Force. Eternal Dominion. We were not expecting you for another week. What is your status? Where is the rest of the fleet?" Vethal closed his eyes for a moment before responding. "Commander Reth, this is Commander Vethal, Acting Commanding Officer of the Eternal Dominion. The rest of the fleet is gone. I need an immediate audience with the High Council. We have information of critical importance to the survival of the hegemony." A long pause. "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" The Third Expeditionary Fleet had 127 ships. "I know." Vethal's voice was flat, empty of emotion. "Now we have 11. Please escort us to orbit, Commander. Time is not on our side." The patrol ships fell into formation around the survivors, and together they descended toward Keth Prime. The planet grew larger in the viewport, a green and gold world that had been the heart of the Volanthi hegemony for 12,000 years. Its cities gleamed with ancient architecture. Its orbital stations bristled with weapons. Its people lived in comfort and security, confident in the might of their military. None of them knew that their world had just changed forever. The High Council chamber was a vast, circular room at the heart of the hegemony's capital city. 12 seats arranged around a central platform, each one occupied by a counselor who represented millions of Volanthi citizens. These were the most powerful individuals in the known galaxy, leaders who controlled resources, commanded armies, and shaped the fate of civilizations. Today, they sat in stunned silence as Subcommander Eurus delivered her report. And, at that point, the human vessel ceased its attack and transmitted its final message before departing the system. Eurus's voice was steady, professional, betraying none of the terror she had felt during the events she described. "The complete sensor logs and analysis are available in the data packet I have provided. I am prepared to answer any questions the Council may have." For a long moment, no one spoke. The counselors stared at their personal displays, reviewing the data, watching the recordings, trying to process information that challenged everything they believed about the universe. Finally, High Counselor Vethak spoke. He was the oldest member of the Council, nearly 700 years old, and his word carried tremendous weight. "Sub-Commander Eurus, you are asking us to believe that a single human vessel destroyed 116 of our warships in less than 2 minutes, using technologies that, according to your own analysis, should not exist." "Yes, High Counselor. That is exactly what I am asking you to believe, because that is exactly what happened." "And Admiral Kethoran? Where is he? Why is he not delivering this report himself?" Commander Vethal stepped forward. "High Counselor, Admiral Kethoran has been hospitalized. The medical staff describe his condition as severe psychological trauma. He is no longer fit for duty. A decorated warrior, broken by witnessing a single battle that killed over 30,000 of our people in the time it takes to eat a meal." Vethal met the High Counselor's eyes without flinching. "I was there, High Counselor. I saw what that ship could do. I watched it fold space around our destroyers and crush them like insects. I watched it appear in 47 different positions in 90 seconds and destroy a warship with each appearance. I watched our weapons, the most powerful weapons in the sector, strike its hull without leaving a single mark." He paused. "Admiral Kethoran is not the only one who will need time to recover from what we witnessed." The council chamber fell silent again. The counselors exchanged glances, communicating through subtle movements of scales and claws, a language that their species had developed over millennia of political maneuvering. "This is a disaster," Counselor Merith declared. She was young for a council member, barely 300 years old, and known for her blunt honesty. "A complete and utter disaster. Our most powerful fleet, gone. 12,000 of our best warriors, dead. And now the humans know that we meant to destroy one of their colonies. They will respond. They will retaliate. And if they have more ships like the one we encountered, we do not know that they have more," Counselor Yeth interjected. "This could have been their only vessel of this type. A prototype. An experimental weapon. Then why send it alone against our entire fleet?" Sub-Commander Wyrus spoke without being asked, drawing sharp looks from several counselors. She pressed on regardless. If this was a prototype, if it was unique and irreplaceable, they would never have risked it in combat. They would have hidden it, protected it. Instead, they sent it directly into the path of our fleet without hesitation. That suggests either supreme confidence in its capabilities, or the knowledge that they have others to replace it if necessary. You speak above your station, Sub-Commander, High Counselor Vethak said coldly. I speak the truth, High Counselor, as I did before the fleet departed, when I warned Admiral Kethoran that we knew nothing about human military capabilities. Euris lifted her chin. My warnings were ignored. Over 30,000 Valanthi died as a result. I will not allow my warnings to be ignored again. The High Counselor studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. Your courage is noted, Sub-Commander. Very well, speak freely. What is your assessment of our situation? Euris took a deep breath. This was her chance, perhaps the only chance the hegemony would get to make them understand the danger they faced. Our situation is desperate, she said. We have encountered a civilization that possesses technology far beyond